The head of the United Nations is calling for an independent investigation following a deadly incident at a Gaza aid site on Sunday. At least 31 people were killed and more than 200 wounded. According to eyewitnesses on the ground and doctors who spoke to NBC News, they say the Israeli Defense Forces opened fire on a group of civilians gathering at an aid distribution point. Now, the IDF and the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the group distributing that aid, deny the military opened fire on civilians.
Well, no one should take anything anyone in the IDF has to say at face value, and we're going to kind of delve into this story and try to figure out what's going on. As NBC News reports, there is a new Israel-approved aid distribution system on the ground in Gaza in lieu of UNRWA, which they effectively defamed and pushed out of the region. Unsurprisingly, it's not off to a great start, as over 24 Palestinians have been killed. That happened at one point at one of the aid sites just this past weekend on Sunday. Now, the IDF insists that it is not to blame for the carnage, and if you're wondering if we should believe them, well, reporter Jeremy Scahill, who's the co-founder of Dropsite News, argues no, and here's why.
The Israelis unleash gunfire and other attacks on this crowd. And as videos and reports start coming out of Gaza depicting this, and we start hearing international doctors that are on the ground there describing the injuries that they're treating, Israel then puts out a video that it says actually shows Hamas was firing on people retrieving aid. Well, that video that the Israelis put out has now been geolocated, and it wasn't near Rafah, where this Witkoff massacre, as the Palestinians are calling it, occurred, but actually had occurred at a different time. And it wasn't Hamas that was actually firing on Palestinians. It was a private gang that there's significant evidence to suggest is being bankrolled or backed by the Israelis to operate as kind of an armed thug force that is selling aid to Palestinians.
Real classy. Now, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is the name of this new group that's allegedly trying to get humanitarian aid to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. There are 4 new aid distribution sites in Gaza. All of them are in the southern half of the territory. The sites are controlled by the United States and Israel supported Gaza Humanitarian Aid Foundation, or GHF, and it's run by American security contractors, ex-military officers, and humanitarian aid officials. The Associated Press reports that it is not known where the funding for this organization is even coming from. The GHF states that it has over $100 million in commitments from an EU government, but they haven't been clear or upfront about which government they're talking about, which European country is funding them. And the organization was being run by a United States military veteran by the name of Jake Wood, but he actually recently stepped down. He stated he was resigning because it was clear the organization would not be allowed to operate independently, which is the least surprising part of this story. Now, Mohammed Salem, who is a father of 5 in Gaza, told Dropsite News about what it is like to get aid from one of GHF's sites. And here's what he experienced just last week on Tuesday. Quote, "When I arrived at the site, I saw hundreds of people lining up in front of iron gates surrounded by security force fences, topped with surveillance cameras. The entry process was strict, starting with ID checks and ending with an eye scan, which significantly slowed down access. As the crowd swelled, people began pushing toward the gate and broke through the fence by force, causing the security personnel to flee. The entire scene descended into chaos as people rushed toward the stacked aid parcels in a desperate attempt to grab whatever they could. I was lucky that I managed to grab 2 food parcels amidst the chaos. As people tried to leave with whatever they had taken, Israeli helicopters flew overhead and opened fire on the crowd, injuring dozens. Now, he had to travel around 2.5 miles to reach the hubs, which is dangerous on its own because if Palestinians make the wrong move, if they happen to be in a zone that Israel has marked as like a war zone within the Gaza Strip. I mean, the whole strip is a war zone, but there are certain areas where they'll just start shooting and killing without asking any questions. Now, the GHF has stated that it'll make more hubs available in the north within the next 30 days, but has not stated exactly where they plan to do it. Veteran aid officials across the UN and other international humanitarian aid organizations have denounced the program, describing the conditions as resembling concentration camps or ghettos. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu does not seem to have much interest in making or creating more aid sites within the Gaza Strip. Just last week, he said that under the aid mechanism, Gaza's population would eventually be moved to a sterile zone in Gaza's far south. He said it was for their protection. While Israeli forces fight Hamas elsewhere, he also said once the Palestinians enter the area, they don't necessarily go back. Well, we already know that Israel's plan is to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to steal their land. And the notion that they're being moved to a tiny, tiny part of the region in the south for their safety is very reminiscent of how Palestinians in the north were evacuated to the south so the IDF can bomb them as they evacuated to the south. I don't believe Netanyahu at all. I don't believe the IDF at all. And I mean, we all remember what various members of the Israeli government were saying about humanitarian aid being let into the Gaza Strip recently. They said they just wanted to provide a facade that they're providing humanitarian aid in order to not get any pushback from Americans, in order to get all the weapons and bombs they need to continue carrying out the slaughter of Palestinians in this ongoing genocide in Gaza. Cenk.
So this is genocide 101. So first of all, in almost every genocide, the aggressor says they were just moving the ethnic minority for their own safety. So the Germans said they were moving the Jews for their safety. It turns out they were lying. The Turks said they were moving the Armenians for their safety. Turns out they were lying. Now here comes the Israelis saying, we're moving them into a tiny little area in the south, and then we're taking control over their food. And once they come to food, we murder them for their own safety. Is it? You know, they would have been a lot more safe if they just got to stay in their house. Oh, that's right, you destroyed 90% of Gaza because that's who you are. You're genociders, okay? So now I studied genocides for a number of different reasons. And I had a debate at UCLA on international law of genocide. And so the Israeli side lost so badly, even though they were actually theoretically international lawyers, and I'm not, that she just resorted to, you're a parasite. I'm like, also something that people who are in favor of genocide do, dehumanize their opponents, especially when they have absolutely no facts to back it up at all, which is the case here. So in those studies, I read about Srebrenica. Srebrenica is a genocide declared so by the United Nations and all international communities and organizations. In Srebrenica, the Serbs killed 8,000 Muslims. So right now, the Israelis have killed a minimum of 54,000 Palestinians, over 30,000 of which are women and children, okay? So what did they do in Srebrenica? Eventually, the Serbs realized, hey, you know what, these guys need food. You know, you could lay siege to a town like in the old days. So they cut off their food until they were starving. And then they brought out food for them. And when they did, of course, the Muslims in that area rushed out to get the food because they were, forget them, their kids were starving to death. And when they rushed to get the food, the Serbs murdered them. Oh, look, that's exactly what just happened here. And in the Flower Massacre, and in several other cases where Israel goes, come here, come get the food. And in this case, fired on by tanks, drones, 100% Israel that did it. And then go, oh, did we murder you while we were giving you aid?
Right.
Oh my God, beware of Israelis bearing gifts, okay? So, but the Palestinians don't have a choice. Either their kids are gonna die of starvation or they're gonna risk going out there and dying. By the way, of the people that were slaughtered here, as usual, mostly women and children. That's like an Israeli calling card, right? So, hey, don't oppose us, we'll murder your family. And they literally have a program called Where's Daddy? Where the AI picks a random person in Gaza, and then but they wait for them to get home, and then when they get home, they murder everyone in the family. And that's genocide 101, and apparently these days, Israel 101. If you don't like it, change. Until you change, Israel is committing one of the worst genocides of my lifetime. It's disgusting. Okay, so then one of our members on YouTube asked, JPLA 1886, how the heck does the IDF deny something they're clearly on camera doing?
They do it all the time. They do it all the time.
No, they do it every time. So now, if the American press treated them like Baghdad Bob, who used to do the same thing. He was Saddam Hussein's spokesperson in Iraq when we were invading, and he would say there are no Americans behind us, and there'd be an American tank behind him. Okay, and so, but what did the press do? They ridiculed him. Ha ha ha, Baghdad Bob, what a stupid liar, right? What does the American press do with the grotesque, ridiculous lies of the IDF? The IDF reports this, it's 50-50, we can't tell it. It's the Hamas health ministry. Oh, I don't know if you can trust those numbers, but the beloved IDF, the most moral army in the world, says that they didn't do it, just magically things popped up. Hamas, and it's all Hamas's fault, right? And the dogs in American media go, yes, Israel's right. Israel's right, Israel's right. Palestinians, who cares? Their lives are not important. 31 people killed. If 31 Israelis were killed, we'll talk about it for 2 years straight. And you all know it. The worst attack that's ever happened because it was Israeli lives, which are worth 100,000 Palestinian lives. I don't mind you considering Israeli lives that valuable. Of course they are, they're human beings. But when you tell me that Palestinian lives are not that important and that Israel can slaughter them at will, and anyone who complains is an anti-Semite, yes, American media, you're guilty. You're guilty and you're deeply racist against Palestinians because you don't think Palestinian lives matter at all. Oh, I'm sorry, go check with the IDF, your boss, as to what the talking point you're supposed to put out about this new massacre, this new part of the genocide. Oh, I'm sorry, you wouldn't want to offend the IDF. You don't want to call it a genocide. Just pretty it up for them, make it sound like it's not so bad. Make it 50-50 like the oil companies do with climate change and the tobacco companies did with cancer. 50-50, let's just confuse the Americans. And what should we do next? Let me guess. Send billions more to Israel to slaughter more Palestinians, but don't complain because Israeli feelings way more important than Palestinian lives. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.